wasn't going to reach out to some of the villages and stuff like that. No, I haven't done that. Our goal is to get to at least 1 million a month. See, it's the same reason I think that CTC is their right. Eventually, we pull that.
Back here. Yeah, like, you're just laughing like I'm over you. Right.
No.
Yes, you did. I could never get my first right. And then he,
You're that guy. I kind of knew you were that guy.
Oh my goodness, I don't remember doing that.
oh.
I seriously, I don't remember. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah. Okay, that's fine. Oh, I see fun now. Hold on.
We have to do that.
Oh, yeah, we
remember
had
elementary school.
Edison home.
Yeah. And then we'll open up.
Yeah, and then switch.
Yeah, no, I tried. Yeah. Okay. So we're at okay. Okay, yeah, sounds good.
Anytime you talk,
Yeah.
I'm gonna have a little noise or something.
Hey, whatever you want to do, man.
Actually, not. Part of it's coming from the part of it.
No, they don't actually go off. Oh wait. We have the new. They all went off. No, you're still here. Okay, this is your damage. No, but now I hear it saying.
There it is. Well, good afternoon and early evening, everybody. Welcome and thank you for being here tonight. For those of you who I haven't had the pleasure yet of meeting, I'm Brian Maher. I'm the superintendent of schools, and I am marshaling all of the power that I have in the office that I have to get rid of that noise that nobody can seem to figure out. So we're doing our best to try to run. Is it? I think we've done it.
It was me. It was this.
How's that for power? So thank you very much for being here tonight. Thank you for being a part of the group we've assembled. We'll go through. We'll have a charge for you in a little while as to what we want you to accomplish as a task force. First of all, I would tell you we had 161 folks who said, "Yeah, I want to be on that task force," or at least who said, yeah, I'd be willing to be on that task force. You probably all fall into somewhere on that continuum. Um, and and we knew that when you look at group processes, after you get so big, you really defeat the purpose of trying to get something accomplished. We are approximating the process that we used for the bond issue about a year and a half ago. We thought that went really well. I promise you, I was telling somebody today, you are not here to endorse anything that we have come up with behind closed doors. You are here to help us to come up with a solution that makes a lot of sense. We have, for probably a year, talked about process in the school district, the process of redoing the boundaries until we got to tonight. And what we wanted to do, we know there's two real huge elements in putting the boundaries together. One of those is logic, and one of those is emotion. So we wanted to do everything we could do to take care of the logic to the extent that we could prior to the emotion really weighing in on the process. So I think we have a logical process that hopefully will be able to withstand some emotion that is sure to come down the road. Here's where we're headed from now until the end of the process. We have 3 meetings. Hopefully you all know you signed up for that. It'll be at least 3 meetings, but most likely 3 meetings to talk about scenarios. We'll throw some scenarios in front of you. Please know that we are not forcing any scenarios on you. We just didn't want to have you to show up tonight and to say, so what do you think? So we're going to put some things in front of you, and then from there we can begin to ferret out what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. We'll have those 3 meetings here in January and February. In March and April, we'll have 5 community meetings. And then also in April, we'll take all of that information to the Board of Education, and the Board of Education will then be able to sift through that information in April and in May and make a decision in June. So that is the process. I want to introduce our Board of Education. Not able to be with us here tonight is Cynthia Mickelson, our board president, although you will hear from her in an interview or in a message that we have taped for you in a little while. We also have Nan Baker, if you just wave maybe, Carly Ryder, Kate Parker, and Todd Tolke, the other 4 members of our 5-member Board of Education. Also, I wanted to introduce you tonight to co-chairs that we have for this process to help take us through the process. Both of our co-chairs randomly, we didn't set this up this way, are Washington High School graduates. You can see them both here in a second, and you can decide whether or not they were in the same Washington High School graduating class. We have actually very, not very new to the community, but very new to really being engaged in some of our school processes is Janan Borovic. Janan, did I say that anywhere near it? Thank you. Thank you. Janan works with the Vera. Actually got to know him just a little bit last year in a meeting we had together, and I can't wait for him to get involved in the school district in a big way. And this will be a beginning step for him. Also, somebody who is not new to the school processes is Kent Alberty. Kent was a longtime school board member and has served this district and this community really, really well for a lot of years. Again, I'm not going to say whether or not they graduated from the same class at Washington High School, but they are both Washington High School graduates. Thank you both for your willingness to be in the position that you are in with us tonight. And with that, you've got a lot of work to do, so I need to put the mic down and let you go to work. And I forget who I go to next. Kent and Janan, would you like to go through some opening remarks?
Well, I would also like to thank everybody for signing up for this process. And
my goal in this is, number one, that we get through this process and that the 30 of us are still speaking to one another when we're done. And I think that we have a really good chance of that happening. I believe that the work that has been put in by school district administration and a lot of people within the school district will give us information that we can start to look at and then decide whether we think that the potential scenarios that have been put together are something that will work or whether they need to be looked at and changed. I also want to make sure that we don't make some of the same mistakes that may have been made 25 years ago. I understand that the process that was used when the boundaries were redrawn then created a lot of anger and angst. And I don't believe that that needs to happen through this. It will be an emotional process. We all know that. Any of us, and I have boys that graduated from the Roosevelt High School, and every one of the schools that my kids attended, my wife and I thought were the best school in the district, whether it was elementary, middle, or high school. And that's a really good problem to have. But then when it comes time to have to make some changes, we have to take a look and make sure that we are meeting the most needs of the most students in the entire district. And I know that we will work through a very positive process to do that. And again, thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Kent. Good evening, everybody. I'm Janan, as Dr. Maher so kindly introduced us earlier. One of the pieces that I wanted to make sure we touched on, where is Deanne in the room? Oh, there's our right-hand person. So the school district has come up with a wonderful way to receive input from the community on this process. And those of you who are joining us this evening can visit the school district website, and there's a Let's Talk flag on that website on the right side, where you can go online and submit comments or questions during this process, and they'll be able to sift through that information and then provide us additional clarity. Moreover, I believe that this process is a beautiful example of the community that we all live in. At the heart of this process is really are the students and are the families. And so what privilege do we all have then to be able to serve them in this important role? And I think the next couple months will be a lot of fun with you all. And Kent and I think both feel fortunate to have been asked to serve in this role. So anytime that you have questions, let us know, or log on and complete your submissions through the Let's Talk process.
Okay, well, I think it's time to actually get to work. Am I introducing Joe? Okay, well, we have with us somebody who just went through the travails of trying to get to Sioux Falls after a significant blizzard, and it looks like your clothes made it, or you travel impeccably well. So we have with us Joe Donovan. Joe is no stranger to the community, no stranger to some of you. Joe actually was in a very similar role to this one during the bond campaign. So he's very good at working through group processes, and hopefully will lead us to as much success in the boundary process as he did through the bond process. So with that, I turn it over to Joe Donovan.
Dr. Maher, thank you. And thank you, everyone, for the opportunity to be here. I will tell you, I literally sprinted through the airport today. My bag was a little bit late. I will tell you that Wisconsin was not a bad place to leave today after the Packers' defeat last night. So it's nice to be in Sioux Falls. It's also nice to be in Sioux Falls, again, as Dr. Maher mentioned. A year and a half ago, I was engaged in your community in advance of your bond vote. And since that time, I've been in dozens of districts. I still tell people about the amount of engagement that you had in this community before that vote. And I think there were more than 300 people showing up at engagement sessions. It was remarkable. And so, again, you know this already, it's a special place. And I'm just very grateful to be here with you. My role with you is to assist with some facilitation. It's to help ensure that the process that's been designed, which is outstanding, is a transparent process. The people from the outside can understand it, can be engaged, can know what's going to happen here today in our future work. That we can have an honest conversation, and ultimately to make sure that community members' voices are heard. So again, I look forward to working with you on that. The other thing that I should mention to you is that, again, I'm an outsider. I don't have children in this district. I don't own property here. I don't have any connection at all with any possible outcome. I'm truly an outsider coming in. My only job is to make sure that the process unfolds as it's been designed. The other thing that I'll mention is that my role will continue after this, and so there'll be some engagement sessions with the larger community. I'll be facilitating those as well. So our work will continue through this entire process, and I'll be a part of that as well. So as you start your work, I'll finish as I started just by thanking you. Both thanks for the opportunity to be with you, but also thank you for taking time out of what I know is your busy schedules to be here for our sessions. So thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Doug Morrison. I work for Dr. Maher as part of his executive team, and so I'm going to help facilitate some of the technical pieces of this tonight. And so, first of all, our Board of Education president couldn't attend tonight, but she wanted to make sure that she left a message. So she did a recording, and we're going to show that to you now. And this is really to show appreciation to you, and it's really the charge from the board to the committee. So we'll start off with that.
Good evening, and thank you to the co-chairs, Janan Berberovic and Kent Alberti, as well as the additional members of the Boundary Task Force Committee for your time and work on this very important matter for the Sioux Falls School District. On behalf of the Board of Education, I would like to take this time to charge you with the following items over the course of your next 3 meetings. Number 1, develop recommendations on the middle and high school boundary changes to coincide with the opening of the new schools in the fall of 2021. Number 2, provide us guidance regarding student transitions as it pertains to grandfathered students, siblings, open enrollment, and etc. When you are forming these recommendations and guidance, we ask that the following guidelines be used in establishing the school boundaries. 1, a quality education for all students. This includes balancing of economic status across secondary schools, ensuring equitable space for programs in district schools, maintaining geographically balanced placement of special education programs. Number 2, student safety and well-being. We would like to provide safe walking routes to schools throughout the district. We would like to strive to ensure equity in the maximum amount of similar situated students who must ride a bus. Number 3, budget considerations. We would like to economize transportation costs by not busing students out of their natural walk areas wherever possible. And we would like to reassign student attendance areas in order to maintain maximum cost efficiency in the district funds. Natural borders as school boundary lines. We would like to keep contiguous neighborhoods together wherever possible and ensure that students will move into middle and high schools with their neighborhood classmates wherever possible. 5, accommodate growth and change. Please analyze the 5-year city growth patterns to attempt to preserve newly drawn boundaries for a minimum of 5 years, and we would like to set attendance areas according to anticipated growth or aging out of neighborhoods. Once you have completed these tasks, we will take these recommendations to the public at 5 community engagement input sessions. Please know that any information or support needed to assist you in this process will be provided to you, and that you are greatly appreciated. We look forward to seeing what recommendations come forth, and thank you once again.
So think the place to start is we've assembled materials for you. We really hope this turns out to be a working session and not just people up here, giving, presentations on different things. We really want you guys to be able to study these and talk about them. And so we've assembled some materials for you. So you have a workbook. It's the bigger size paper. And I'll just walk you through that workbook because it's reference material that you'll have for this in future meetings. In addition, we'll be adding to this. So I'll just kind of walk you through the different pieces. So first page 2 is really just the boundary task force meetings. And I know Deanne has assembled a book of task force members and pertinent information. So you have that throughout the process. The next page is just what Board President Mickelson just walked you through. So you'll always have that as a reference as what the charge to the task force is, which is basically to come up with some options for middle school and high school, and then also to give some input as far as the transition process as far as students. So you'll have that for future reference if you need to refer to it. Page 4 is the timeline. This is the timeline that the board adopted several months ago that we've been working on. Think of phase 1 as the background work that got us to this point. There's a lot of technical aspects that we're able to produce the tools that you'll be looking at here and the different views and whatnot. And we're really entering the last part of that phase 1, which is the boundary committee meetings, and then from that will follow the public feedback sessions. And then we'll go into phase 2, which is really the time when the board gets the options that we hear from not only the task force and that anything we hear from the community. And then they really that gives them a couple months to study it and anything additional that they want to see and put together from that point. And our hope is that by June, we'll be able to finalize the boundaries that will go into effect when the new middle school and high school open up. And then phase 3 is really, once that's done, is the communication effort that we have across the community to inform parents of the changes and where their kids will be going to school and who's grandfather, who's not, all those types of things. And so and then into the open enrollment process, how that will factor in, and then ultimately to August 2021 when the new schools and boundaries will go into effect. So that's kind of the general timeline. Page 5 is a general structure at how we see these meetings flowing. So if you think about it, this is meeting 1. You've got some background information, introductions. Those won't need to happen the next meetings. You've got the charge from the Board of Education. Really what we hope to cover tonight is to begin the conversation on middle school boundaries. And so we want to present some options of those to you, have you look at those, discuss them in groups, and then give us your feedback on what you think of those, and then any other thing that you want us to consider or to look at. And then the second meeting, we'll pick up middle school again. We'll try to at least finalize those to the extent we feel comfortable with that, and we'll move into high school. And then so the second part of the meeting number 2 will be to discuss high school. And in meeting 3, we'll try to wrap up high school and talk about some transition rules. And if we need to have a 4th meeting, we'll talk about that as a group. Do we need to have a 4th meeting where we sort of look at a final report, final recommendation? So we'll consider that as time goes on. Basically, we want to make sure that you as a task force feel that you've had enough time to look at what you need to give some input. And so we will accommodate whatever you guys as a task force think that you need to be able to do that. We talked about the task force meetings, and then Board Member Mickelson talked about the community engagement sessions. I would say minimally we'll have 5 that we've scheduled throughout the middle school. We already know, and we've gotten some feedback that we should probably have a session that's not at night, maybe on a Saturday And so we'll consider that. Again, we don't know what to expect when we go into these community engagement sessions. We don't know if 20 people or 2,000 people will show up at these, but we want to make sure everybody's heard. So if we need to add additional meetings, we'll certainly do that. As we've allowed ourselves a lot of time in this process, essentially we have now until June to hopefully get to a place where we can make a decision. So those are the initial 5, and I'm sure there'll be at least a few others that come out of that. On page 7, you have a view of what the current boundaries look like for elementary school, middle school, and high school. Those may become important to you as you're looking at different options, and so you'll have those as a reference in your workbook. Page 9. I'm going to go through these and then come back to them, but we have 3 versions that we're bringing to you tonight. And what I'll say about the 3 versions is it's basically a group within the district that has been looking at these for the last couple, 3-4 months, trying to look at all the things that need to be considered with boundaries, such as trying to level the number of students that go to each school, looking at specialty schools, looking at all the things that Board Member Mickelson talked about in her charge. And so we have laid out a page like this for every middle school version that we'll present to you, and you have as a reference that you can use in your groups or whatever. So I'll just say this is version 1, there'll be a version 2, a version 3, and the next page then is just a visual of looking at every version side by side. So if you wanted to just sort of look at, well, what do the options look at, just as far as the raw boundaries look like, you have that on page 12, and also showing the current boundaries. So it's kind of a way to look at it all as one pictorially. And then the next page, we're giving you the same view, but we're overlaying that with students, okay? For the cohort of students that would be attending the middle school at that period of time. So this is not all school district students. These would be the cohort of students that would be attending middle school. That may be important to you as you look at where they live. I can tell you that as a group, it's probably the first thing we did was when we took the data and we were working with the students, we assigned them all random identifiers. So even our group, we don't know the names of the people that we're working at. We know that we assign them random numbers to protect everybody's privacy, so to speak. So that's one view. And then page 14, this is another view that overlays the current elementary school boundaries against the middle school versions. This may be important to you because one of the guiding principles that we want to try to live by as much as possible is we'd like certain elementary schools to feed certain middle schools. That's not always possible, but it's certainly a guiding principle when we looked at putting boundary scenarios together that we looked at. So you can see the dark lines are the proposed middle school option, and then the colored boxes are the elementary schools. And so that's another view that you have to be able to sort of look at the different options. Page 15, then we try to bring it just from a data perspective. So you can see this page starts at the top. You have the recommended capacity of each middle school based on the number of rooms and the capacity utilization factors that we like to run at, one at 85, one at 90%. And then you go through the base scenarios, which is really taking the students and looking at how they fall into each one of those middle schools. And then you'll see the middle row there, which is something I'll come back to when I talk about version 1, but we have some specialty schools within our middle schools. We have a Spanish immersion program that feeds out of the elementary school into the middle school, and we also have an honors program, and those are centrally located. And today they're centrally located at Edison, and we built our same models on that scenario because it's a centrally located school, and that's where the programs are today. So when we look at Edison, we have to level set that population to be able to accommodate that inflow of students. So you have a before view, and then you have an after view after we layer those students in that we believe will be attending those programs. And then, as Board Member Mickelson talked about, part of the charge was to look at socioeconomic demographics of the district and boundary. And so we've given you some views of what that might look like. So and we base that on number of students that are on free or reduced lunch, and we're providing those percents to you. It's like, again, it's part of the charge that we should be mindful of when we're looking at establishing boundaries, because we try to make our schools as reflective as possible of the community that we live in, knowing that that's not entirely possible to make all of them the same, but it's certainly something that we should be mindful of. And I think is that it? And then finally, I referenced before elementary schools feeding middle schools. And so this gives you a view on the left-hand side. You can see all the elementary schools, and then under each version, where they're feeding, which middle school they would be feeding. So you can see where they currently feed and where they are under each of our 3 versions. And then off to the left, giving you a point of reference of how many of those kids, grades 3 to 5, attend those elementary schools. And that's also a late handout that I put on your tables here, where you can see it's the same numbers, just graphically, shown as to how it may be important to you when you're looking at the boundary scenarios, how many students are in which elementary school. And so those are kind of the tools that we've put together. Like I said, a lot of background work to be able to put those together over the last 2 or 3 months has gone into it. A great technical team that has worked hard to put those together. And so with that, I think we might as well just dive in and kind of go back to version 1 and kind of look at, walk you through how this workbook works. So version 1, you can see in your workbook on the upper left-hand corner is essentially exactly what it says. It's what we're calling version 1. And you can see what's new now is you see Ben Rifle Middle School down in the southeast corner there. So when we built our boundaries, we basically know as an adjective, let's just say that trying to put, it's a little different, but let's think of it this way, trying to put 1,000 kids into each middle school and to have elementary schools feed middle schools. And so that's kind of how we started east and worked our way west. And so in this scenario, we basically filled up Ben Rifle. And you can see then on the right-hand side, in the upper right-hand box, the elementary schools that we have feeding those middle schools. So you can see in this case, for Ben Rifle, you have most of John Harris, you have Harvey Dunn, and you can read in your book there what's feeding that. So, and then what we've given you, the line underneath that, you can see the current enrollment of those schools, okay? Currently, so you would say, okay, at Edison, there's 1,117 students currently at Edison. Kind of give you a point of reference as to the current population of our current middle schools. Then the next line down, we go into, we're showing you grade 3, 4, and 5. We know who those kids are today. They're in our district. They'll be moving up to middle school. We know where they live. And so based on the boundaries that we drew, we're able to place them into the schools that would be their home attendance center. And so that's where you see Ben Rifle in this scenario would give you 1,016 kids. That home attendance center would be that. And we worked our way across. We put in, you can see Patrick Henry up there, Whittier, and you're working your way over. Now this middle section here is what I was talking about before. We have the Spanish Immersion Program and we have the Challenge Center. And we know that those are specialty programs that continue on in the middle school. And so again, we know based on the kids that are attending the Spanish Immersion Program today, we know where they live. And so we take some out of their home attendance center and we move them to into Edison. And you can see right here, you have a positive 207 coming into Edison to accommodate the Challenge Center or Honors Program. And then you have almost 300 kids that will be in the Spanish Immersion Program. And then of course, they're coming through they're coming from all those schools, so we have to subtract them out. It's really a zero-sum game. It's just simply an open enrollment process across the district. I can highlight generally where the growth will come in the district. Yeah. I think I always say these are sort of a starting point. So these are 3 versions that we came up with that our board has never seen before. You guys are the first one to see them other than our working group that technically put these together. So you can say, yeah, we don't really like this version, or we want to see this. Could you look at this? Understanding, we have to draw the line somewhere, but we want to make you comfortable that if you want to say, hey, what if we did this, then we can certainly look at those and bring them back to you. Knowing at the end of the day, we've got to kind of balance the number of kids and keep all the other things in factor. So yeah, we have no favorite option. I can tell you that. We've just tried to put 3 different views together of what the scenarios might look like. Ian, did you?
I'm going to mention all of you have a microphone on your table. And Anthony spoke, and some of you on the other side of the room may not have heard. When the little light on the bottom is green, that microphone is live. So we would ask you to please pull the microphone when you have the question so that others in the room can hear that question as well. And if you want to turn the microphone off as you are having small group discussion, you simply press the button and it goes red. So please don't be afraid to do that. We are recording the conversation so that we have this for our minutes of meetings and such. And we really would like to hear the comments that you're making. So please pull the microphone towards you and turn it off and on as you need to.
I'm referring to page 16, and there seems to be 4 or 5 elementary schools that are missing from that graph. So Hawthorne, Robert Frost, Discovery, Garfield. Is that an incomplete list or the page 16?
That are in this?
They're not on this graph. I was just starting to do a cross check, but Hawthorne, Robert Frost, Discovery, Garfield are the 4 that I found. Okay, Discovery. Robert Frost, Hawthorne, Garfield.
Yep, that's a good catch. We'll make sure those added. If you look at your handout, it's the same information that should be on there pictorially. Okay. So yep. So we'll go back to version 1 here. So talked about trying to accommodate for those specialty programs. So if you want to move. So then at the bottom there, you have the net effect after you make the adjustment for those specialty programs. So you end up with essentially grand total with the program. You can see Ben Rifle at 940, Edison 1191 on across, and then the difference is just the difference from the current enrollment. And then over on the left hand, or down in this box here on the lower right hand side, you can see what we call the economic status, or essentially the percent of kids that are on free or reduced lunch, both currently, the base home attendance center, and then after we make the allocation for the specialty schools, because that does have an impact. So tend to look at this versus that, just so we're mindful of that. And so version 2, essentially the difference between version 2 and version 1 is that we are going up and we're changing Edison, we're changing around things between Edison and Memorial a little bit. And maybe the easiest place to go is where we show all of them together, all the pictures, all the versions. So let's look at this one just to get a kind of a top level perspective. So version 1, you can see, and maybe look at the one with the overlays, the elementary school overlays. Okay, this one. So you can see version 1, we just talked about, or at least went through, you know, the components of what we're showing there. Version 2 essentially is, we've made some minor changes to Cleveland and Rosa Parks, only to, there's some minor things that you'll see that basically try to true them up to the entire middle school or entire elementary school feeding the middle school scenario. But the biggest change on this one is you can see the Garfield attendance area. We have moved into Edison, and we've moved what is the JFK area. You can see the hand there, out of Edison into Memorial, and then we've taken that lower left-hand box, which is part of Pettigrew, and we've moved that into the George McGovern area. Version 3 is basically then instead of in what we're doing now is we've sort of restored. We brought Pettigrew all the way back into Memorial, and then to fill McGovern, we've come down and brought in part of Oscar Howe and JFK to be able to level set that. So most of everything falls in fairly nicely as far as when you're talking about Ben Rifle, Patrick, Whittier. The hardest part is trying to divide up the west side to be able to get kids between really what becomes Edison, Memorial, and McGovern. And probably then maybe go to the page that has the data, just the data for the numbers. There, thanks, Nicole. So when we look at the numbers for the different versions, I'm going to talk about that middle piece there. You can see under version 1, Ben Rifle is pretty much pretty stable with those feeder schools that we have feeding into there. At one time, we looked at being able to feed all of John Harris into Ben Rifle, but it just made too many kids in Ben Rifle, knowing that we have to allow for some growth on that southeast side. And so we took part of John Harris, the part that's west of Southeastern, and we moved that into Patrick Henry. And you'll kind of see that as maybe in groups as you look through those. Edison, pretty stable again. The numbers that we're showing there, and the only thing that's different on the scenarios with Edison is either moving Garfield in or out and JFK in or out. Is kind of how to look at that. McGovern, you can see basically it does change between the versions because of how you tend to divide up the west side and the different scenarios there. And same with Memorial. Memorial's our biggest middle school right now. It has almost 1,400 kids. We would certainly like to get that down. And then Patrick Henry, pretty stable. And then Whittier, again, depending on what happens with that Garfield area, moves them up or down. Moving them down into the 800 range isn't a bad thing, especially if we decide to look at rebuilding that school, 10 years from now or the next bond issue. It's not a bad size for that school, to be honest. So that's kind of the numbers as they play out under the different scenarios as far as what we're looking at level setting. As far as future growth, there's basically a little bit in the southeast, okay? When we talk about Ben Rifle, trying to allow for some growth over on that side. And the other area would be in the northwest, up by McGovern, which still has a lot to develop out. So we know we have to leave room there. And then we're also looking at acquiring some land from Lennox over on the west side as well, where the hand is there. That will also allow future growth on the west side. So we know we have to, even throughout this boundary process, we have to leave some capacity on the west side, either at Memorial or George McGovern. Now some of the, let's just go back to version 1. One of the challenges with Memorial is that you can see where that star is, where the school actually sits in relation to the boundaries. So no matter what scenario is, it's very hard to just say, well, I'm just going to take the northern half of Memorial and move it up to McGovern or move it somewhere else, because those kids are in walking distance now. And so just because of the way it's positioned, you almost have to look at taking part of something down here and moving it to be able to accommodate that. And so that's just kind of one of the challenges that we face. So with that, I think what I'm going to do, our hope is that you guys can work in groups and dialogue with the materials you have, talk about some of the issues that you see, that you want to see, questions that you have, and maybe work as a group for a half hour or so, and then we'll get back together and then just see what questions come up. We've got some bigger versions that I'll turn over of the different versions that are of the 3 versions that are actually a little bigger map. If you need to get up and go look at some of those, you're welcome to do that. And then we can kind of answer questions. And like I said, the hope is that it's really a working session, allow you guys to look through the materials, have questions, and handle it that way rather than have me sit up here for another hour and a half. So, which nobody wants. So with that, I'm going to turn those pictures around and just in your groups, just talk about things that come to mind, and we'll get back together in a little bit here.
Yeah, pretty tough game last night, guys. There were a lot of, it was funny going to the airport. It's be interesting. No Packers fans.
That's going to be Vikings and Bears. This guy out to the Lions.
Yeah, right.
At some point, you know, it's a competitive thing. I know the Packers sweat. But I don't know that they're going to do that. People keep saying they're they were 9-17.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
I look at them.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah.
This is it's good, but you know,
Who knows? Injuries.
Exactly. All talk about these people projecting out like next year.
Right.
I mean, I think they will, but I think the only way that will happen is a little bit more.
Right.
Take
Right.
20 million.
Yeah.
You put 20 million.
Yeah.
It's like, he's supposed to one of the best.
Right.
So you can do it. I think that's why he's so smart. I would take 10 million.
No, right.
So
Maybe the O-line.
he's smart enough to do that too. He's because he gets it. I think he's taught us wisely to do that. He goes
Yeah.
Don't count on doing all this.
Pennywise and Pound Foolish. I mean, who's going to take? Yeah. Right. Yeah, right.
Kelsey, these guys. It's uphill battle.
Right. Yeah, interesting. I didn't have it back. Very far. So there was one.
I think he keep, you know, I think he get a home run. Might change things.
I think people have reasonable expectations. Yeah, I was with a bunch of guys last night. There was no one that had oversized ambitions for the team or expectations for the team. fun to be competitive.
Yeah, right there. It's,
Okay, great.
I think we just start with.
Yes, okay, so this heading. Yes.
I mean, hoping that somebody was.
All right, folks, how do we do? It is a lot to take in. This is hard work. No one said that this was going to be easy, right? So here's the good news. The good news is we have a lot of time, okay? And we have some time tonight. And the idea is that we just want to, so many good conversations. I was just listening in on these small group conversations, and they were really good conversations. And so the idea now is just to have you talk with the larger group about the conversations that you are having in your small group. It can be general. And so who wants to start and just talk about what you discussed? And by the way, Deanne would be very mad at me if I didn't mention, make sure you hit the button on the table mic, okay? All right, I promised that I would do that. Who wants to start? Who wants to talk about your conversation at your table? Anyone? Yeah, go ahead. Make sure you push the button.
Oh, good. Hi, I'm Megan. One of the main things we had talked about in especially version 2 and version 3 is just some question marks on some of the pocketing and why certain, I guess, breakouts happen. So for example, if we're looking at Ben Rifle, why in version 2 and 3 there's this interesting little stripe that happens. What was the thought process behind that? How did that come into play? And then if you look on the west side, the 3 little pocket areas, well, 4 technically. Version 2 has a very interesting one down at the bottom. But the other ones with the little kind of hanging off parts of the school district. So we had some questions on that, what the thought process was behind doing that. We also were interested in getting more data information on ethnic diversity and on academic diversity. If we could get a little bit more on that about, so we get the free and reduced lunch, we understand that, but more on the ethnic diversity and how that would change in each of these districts. What's our other? And then the academic. So those were kind of our main core questions. Was they were just looking for a little bit of answers to or a little bit more elaboration on.
That little strip there is actually a strip that is part of Cleveland now. And so when we added that back into version 2 and version 3 of going to Ben Rifle, we were trying to keep all of Cleveland going to there. And so that's essentially why that was there. And that same with that other little true up that we did on that side. So it was trying to preserve the elementary schools to going to the middle schools. So that's why those that strip and the piece down there were changed slightly. So hopefully that helps you with that.
So we kind of talked about some of the same things with the pockets in the districts, and since part of our charge is to look at transportation costs, we had kind of thought about what busing costs might look like, especially with some of those little pockets, and then also looking at districts that run north-south and what that might mean in terms of trying to bus children down Minnesota and other, main roads at the beginning of the day. So we would like some more information on busing numbers. I think that would help. We'd also wondered about future growth on the west side and whether that was going to feed Memorial or McGovern, because we were looking at each of those different schools and looking at where more room is allowed under some of the different plans. We, I think, kind of came to the conclusion that we liked version 1 the best, taking those things into consideration. But we did have some questions on that one in terms of economic status. It looked like that one perhaps didn't drop down the economics on George McGovern in particular as much as we might like. And then we kind of echo some of those concerns too about looking at some of the ethnic demographics and see what that looks like for that one too. And then we did notice on version 1 too, not only does it not have some of those little pockets, but it looked like in the chart, at least on the information that we have now, and I know some of the elementary schools are missing, but there were only 4 splits of elementary schools to different middle schools as opposed to 5 and 6 with versions 2 and 3.
I don't know, busing one. I don't know, some generalities, there's about 50-some% of our kids are bused today. 61? Okay, so 61% of our middle school population is bused today. We feel, I guess, just in a general sense, you would say with an additional middle school, that some of that busing would improve. I don't have exact costs for you, but you would have to say just with the addition of a middle school and kids being more proximity to there might be less busing, but I don't think it would be more than 61%, but
no, you would assume some of the Ben Rifle kids would walk, and currently they're getting bused.
Yeah.
Either Whittier or
But at least that give you a frame of reference today how many kids are bused. And then as far as the west side, you're talking about future growth. So we know that in the George McGovern, in the northwest portion of town, that will grow eventually, and that will, as that develops out. And then additionally, and so that growth would be in the George McGovern school, which is why that's sort of under this scenario left a little smaller. Now, we're in a process with Lennox right now of acquiring some land over there. I don't know, Todd, can you maybe show them on one of those maps kind of where that area is? But we're in a process of acquiring about 300 acres, or 5. And so that will add more to the west side, and we, I think, although it's not part of the district now, so it's not part of our boundary, I guess we would anticipate that that would be part of the future George McGovern as well, only because, there's just no place, Memorial being full the way it is, there's no place to put those kids. So most of the growth on the west side would go up to McGovern.
Sorry, so when you speak of purchasing the land, it includes that expansion of the boundary itself. The boundary itself.
Essentially,
you will acquire Lennox.
Essentially, it would move from the Lennox School District to the Sioux Falls School District.
Yeah.
The district isn't going to purchase that land. We're going to transfer that land into the district boundaries. Is that, or we're going to purchase 3,000 or 300 acres, 500 acres?
Well, we'll acquire the land, and there's a financial arrangement between us, between the two districts to try to make them whole. They just don't want to. It's so far north of where they are. They just don't want to put another school up there, and it makes sense for us to take that on. So, and it's no development out there now, so we will have to designate that as going to some school at some portion once we acquire it. I don't know, Todd, any other
Yeah, I
feedback?
just say it's a tax sharing agreement and it's limited. I mean, it's got an end date, but we're going to share the taxes off that land for a while, depending on what type of property it is.
Well, we kind of like version 3 the best, but we certainly would be willing to compromise. Some of the questions that we had were, as we looked at version 3 down at the bottom corner, there's a little piece that is now assigned to Memorial that we wondered if it would be possible to move that into McGovern. It's on the southeast tip of Memorial, over on the corner over here, and wondered if that could be part of McGovern. Was one of the questions that we had. A couple of other things that that little piece right down in there where the hand is. If that could be moved over into McGovern, and that would take just a little bit more pressure off of Memorial if that could be done, depending on where natural boundaries are and what the.
We can look at that and report back to what how many kids that is next week.
Okay, that'd be great. Then a couple of other questions that we had is looking at the numbers for Edison. We thought we're kind of at the upper end of what we thought the total enrollment at Edison should be. Would there be any possibility of looking at maybe taking the honors program and moving the honors program to perhaps Patrick Henry and keeping the language immersion program at Edison, or does that then cause more of a domino effect? But that is one of the things that we thought, well, to have both of those programs at Edison is great, but if we can't really accommodate that from number standpoint, if we looked at as a district looked at moving honors to Patrick, is that a possibility? Or is there also a possibility of perhaps adding on at Edison and accommodating the additional enrollment that there would be?
Yeah, we can certainly look at, like you said, if moving the honors program, if we were to move that to Patrick, what that would do, and then if we'd have to reduce that somehow else. So we can certainly look at that.
Other pretty well covers it. Thank you.
One thing too that we'll make available to you is those maps back there. We will give you a link to those to where you can pull up any version of those on your PC. You can pull up version 1, version 2, version 3, current elementary, the current middle school boundaries, and then you can type in any address and see where it falls out on there. So don't feel like you need to take pictures or memorize that or whatever. We'll make that available to you where you can zoom out and zoom in and sort of, between, it's a lot to absorb tonight. We know that, but we want you to sort of take the materials, and other than what we come up here tonight, is to the next week and a half, look through it, go online, look at those boundaries if you choose to, and say you can really look more at specific streets or things of that nature. And so, right here. So we'll give you this link, and basically you can just click on whatever option you want to look at. It'll bring it up to you, and then you can again zoom in or out, and you can be able to see exactly. And then if you go up there and type in an address, it'll pin it on the map as far as you want to see that. So we'll send you that link tomorrow first thing, so you have that available to you for the next week and a half. So sometimes it's just helpful to sit in space of your own quietness and just sort of, okay, look through the materials and look online maybe at some of this stuff in a more interactive sense. So the team has worked hard to be able to give you those tools to be able to do that. So we'll send you that link as well and make that available to you.
Yes, John is my name. Are we going to receive information about ethnicity or as well as far as the students?
Excuse me?
Information about.
You know, I will, as I said, when we went through this process, we assigned every student a random ID. And so we will certainly, I will talk with I'm not putting you off. I will talk to our school in-house legal counsel and kind of consult him as to what information we should be disclosing and not disclosing, right? Just out of make sure that we're doing what we should be doing as a district.
To echo across the same thing, I think all anyone really wants is just kind of the same breakdown of like percentages, and I mean, I would obviously not identify them as information. So. Yep.
So we had a great discussion over here too. And what we did, we had a lot of very thoughtful conversations. I think there are a couple of things that jumped out to us right away about some of the, maybe some of the movement or some of the separation, these little pockets that exist. But we went through and had a pretty thoughtful conversation with each of us centered in different areas. And when we looked at the criteria that we were charged with, if we looked at different scenarios, quality education for all students, then by our analysis, it looked as though all proposals improve economic diversity. All of them improve above what's present today. Mm-hmm. But we saw that version 2 and 3 were better in that area. And then when we looked at safe walking routes, maximum time on bus, those types of things, 1 and 3 appeared to be best. For our third criteria, version 1 and 3 also appear to be best, and then contiguous neighborhoods, of course, number 1 was best, and then accommodating growth and change, we had number 2. So our question is we kind of maybe look at the criteria that we're tasked with and look at all these proposals. We had maybe some questions on that we would agree with the first table. I think Megan, maybe Anita brought up the idea of the transportation numbers. We'd be interested in knowing what that looks like for some of those, and then how many students would be impacted by limits if that does come to be, and when would that be known? Because we have some questions maybe. Stephanie had some really great ideas of maybe just moving some of the pockets just in some really good ways. So we want to maybe know how specific would you like us to be with our request for information before next week? That's our question.
Sure. Well, like I said, this is a process. So, like, the beauty is that we're not asking for a decision. There's no decision, right, to be made. It's really coming up with some viable options that can move on to the community for comment. However, if you have information requests, we want to get those back to you, right? We don't want to say, well, we can't produce that. Most things we can produce. So if you want to know how many students are in a particular pocket, we can certainly do that. It's just that it's not doable in 5 minutes time. So we would take those requests as long as you get them to us, I would say by, let's just say midweek. If you have some requests, get them to us, then we can put them into our, software and all that type of stuff and pull out that information to be able to get you that because, sure, we've gone through the similar things with our team is that, well, how many people are in this pocket, and this pocket, and this pocket, and it's, there's a process for doing that. And so we're more than happy to accommodate any of those types of requests that help you make, to get comfortable with, any different scenario, or even in the final report is passing something on, like you said, we're we like this scenario because of this, we like this scenario because of this, we don't like this scenario because of that, and that may be what the final report is, right? So it's sort of giving that feedback, because it's going to be a 5-month process to be able to get to the board comfortable with that everybody's been heard and they've looked at all different options. So yeah, if you have, certainly send them on to Deanne's email and she'll forward them on to me, and we'll kind of catalog those and then report back to those. What I'm hearing, Kent has a request on the specialty schools, and we've heard you on the demographics, so that's something that we can hopefully be able to present in some form or fashion to you on that. Yeah, and that's our job, is to get you guys what you need. Like I said, these were options that we came up with based on information that we have.
One question, and this is more of just a question about what we can know, and I'm wondering if there's any data or opportunity to know if the propensity to leave the district, if based on any decision that we make. So is there a way to know, like if a student or a family is currently enrolled in the public school and then this decision rolls out, is there a way to know, have a percentage or a propensity to leave the district to go to, say, a private school?
I mean, predicting how many, or well, we did this 25 years ago, so I don't know. We're all on sort of new territory here from that standpoint. But certainly we know that students and their families have choice in Sioux Falls, right? To attend one of our schools, or there's a great Catholic system, or a Sioux Falls Christian, or a number of schools out there, and those are always open. I don't know if we choose an option, if it'll be so displeasing to people that they will choose to move to another district or not. Dr. Maher, I don't know if you have anything you want to comment on that, other than kind of from that standpoint.
I think you nailed it. I was sitting back here thinking about, can we get this information and that information? And I think there's a whole lot of the information that you've talked about that we can get. But the last one, I thought the best method that we can come up with for that, I think, is to roll the dice. I don't know how we would address that issue. The free and reduced price lunch, the race and ethnicity information, I think we can get all that, and I bet legal counsel will let us provide that information, and I think that's pertinent. I don't know how to do the predictive information on who might leave, but for the rest of it, I think we can really get you a lot of information between now and the next meeting.
Yeah. We just know, we know we're growing at 200, 300 kids a year, right? And that's been pretty predictable over the years. So, that's kind of what we kind of use a lot of different models to project that. And so that's what we know at this point. We hope that after 5 months and 6 months of being transparent, letting everybody have a voice, that at least people feel that they've been heard in this process. Will it please everybody? Probably not, right? And so, but we just have to at least make sure everybody's heard, and then they have their personal choice to make. And then, like we said, there's always been a element of open enrollment in the district, and we've tried to accommodate that as best we could. However, we know in recent years that has been more limited than before, just because of the capacity that our schools are at. So we're hopeful that building a new high school, building a new middle school, obviously increases our capacity, and maybe able to bring back some open enrollment scenarios that have been closed in the past, but we'll have to see. But that's our hope. And in the third meeting, Dr. Nold is going to walk you through the current open enrollment process, and then some thoughts around what you guys think about, should seniors be grandfathered in? What about juniors? What about siblings? What about all those types of things? He'll kind of walk you through the law, what we're required to do, and then what we have been doing as a district in the past, kind of the hierarchy that we follow as far as school size, class size, and then being able to prioritize open enrollment. And then, like I said, we certainly know on the west side has been closed to open enrollment, and even other schools. If you look at the trend, Patrick Henry has been sort of dwindling as far as open enrollment, and so we're hoping that that enables us at least to look at some more open enrollment than what we've been dealing at. So that's another choice if you, but it's really based on capacity and a whole process that we'll kind of walk you through.
Hi, my name is Jessica. I think we talked about a lot of the same things that everybody else talked about, the questions that we all had. I think a concern that came up, I'd almost like to see a fourth version presented that's kind of based off of version 3. But if we're using the reduced lunches as a indicator of diversity right now, that version takes Memorial from a 22% down to an 18%. And that's really low. That section that you're cutting out there from 41st Street south of Roosevelt and down over to the interstate, that's cutting out a lot of that diversity that's currently at Memorial, that's already the least diverse middle school in Sioux Falls. It would be nice to see a version of that that somehow addressed the diversity at Memorial.
Okay.
About towns surrounding Sioux Falls. Like, as far as I knew, at least a few years ago, Harrisburg didn't allow open enrollment. So, like, for the southeast side, that's pretty much developed for the most part. We wouldn't really see much more growth moving into that school area. But, like, the west side, there's a lot of open area that still has to develop.
Yeah, on the southeast side, there actually is quite a bit of land. We were talking about that earlier. That's still yet to be developed out there. We refer to the Capiman land, and so we don't know if that will be apartments. And so we're kind of watching that that area. It is going to be an interesting area because you have Brandon building a new school out there. You've got Harrisburg, who, like you said, doesn't accept open enrollment at this point. So. So yeah, it is an area that has some development left. That's why we didn't want to make Ben Rifle full right away, because we think there's some. But certainly the northwest side, and then the west side as we acquire, more land over there is where we see most of the growth. So we've got to allow for some growth over on that side of town.
So does, like, Brandon take open enrollment? So if people were upset with where those boundaries lie, that they would have that option to go Sioux Falls?
I don't know to what extent they take open enrollment now.
I just didn't know if that would affect, like, the northwest side too, if they would.
It's an entry. I can tell you as a district, we have about a little over 1,000 kids that open enroll into our district, and we have about 350, 400 that open enroll out of the district. And most of the time it is in those pockets, right, where you may be closer to Brandon or Tri-Valley or things like that. It just works out better for those families. So I would say we're a net importer, but we certainly have families today that open enroll out of the district for a variety of reasons. But we also have a good portion that open enroll into the district for a variety of reasons as well.
Do we have any idea right now of how many students are currently enrolled in, like, the private schools? And then are those numbers incorporated in of the current private school enrollees into these numbers? Or what is that looking like? That somebody had talked about private school before, so that was just a question that I had. How many are currently enrolled in private school? And are those numbers included currently in these
numbers? So the numbers that you are seeing now that we're using in our plans, our kids are already in our district. So we already know that the middle school, when it opens, in the fall of 2021 are already in our schools, and we know where they live, and that's how we're able to project it. And so how many are in private school now? I guess we're just assuming at this point it's going to be roughly the same ratio. Like I said, we know we're growing at 250, 300 kids a year, and been pretty like clockwork. And so we're counting on a similar growth pattern. That was kind of, when we went through the bond referendum process, kind of went through that process to demonstrate that we needed a high school and a middle school. So so these are kids actually already in there, so we should be, you know, pretty accurate at with that point. At that point, so I think, you know, so at least as far as we'll look at a fourth scenario with what it would look like to bring more, you know, socioeconomic diversity into. We heard that's a version that you want to see. Kent will look at the kind of give you a, you know, view of if Patrick Henry were to move in, or the honors program, and then we'll get you the diversity numbers, which I don't think will be a problem, and we'll send that to you ahead of time, ahead of the next meeting. So you know, we have the data. If we're okay to release it, we'll just make sure that we give that to you in an email in, you know, in the next couple of days, so that you have that to look at before the next meeting. In this scenario 4, we'll just call it, and then however we portray, whatever we come up with for the honors program, we'll present those at the next meeting to you. We'll kind of wrap up, or at least put middle school over here, and then we'll dive into high school and kind of stay with that rhythm, and then hopefully get through that. And then the third meeting we'll kind of, you know, synthesize everything we got. And then if we need a fourth meeting to talk about a final report, we can talk about that as well. But we want to be respectful of your time and make sure that we aren't here, you know, to all hours of the morning looking at this stuff. And also, it's been a lot to absorb, and we want to give you guys the next week and a half to go and study your material and fire your questions away. So
Doug, just one quick request. I think it would be prudent of us to show grade area, or even if we're not willing to kind of commit to which school, but show those growth areas. Show them by color. I mean, just put it on paper so that people can see that we know where that's coming. And
yeah, we'll take the current, we'll just take the AMAP of the district, and we'll kind of show you where that growth is going to happen in general, right? So I think it's easy to see if you were to pull up if you were to pull up that one of those, you can even probably go in and see, like if you were to zoom in over here, and you sort of looked up there's an area that's got to develop up. You can basically see any place that there aren't streets per se, and it's not in the industrial park. So you know the airport's the airport. And so you can kind of see some areas on the east side that are in our district that are sort of land that will eventually be built out with homes. And so that's why we say we still think there's some growth areas in the east side, and we don't, and then if you did the same on the west side, you would be able to see up in the, obviously up in the George McGovern area to the northwest up there, where up in that development. So in a general sense, you can go in and look at these maps and kind of see where some of that development is yet to happen that will fill in eventually. But knowing that at some point, absent doing another sort of land swap or whatever you want to call it with another neighboring district, we're landlocked. We're sort of landlocked, and we've known that. So it's basically filling in what we have. Obviously, nothing's going to go here. Industrial part of town, probably not much is going to happen there. So it's kind of those two areas that we see.
Yes, when you look at page 13, this is my name, John. it shows us where everybody lives in Sioux Falls. Is it possible for us to get a map like that in terms of the issue of race as well? Because I think we need to look at geography in terms of race and not just the numbers. So if we could see a map like that in terms of race as well, I think it'd be very helpful to develop the diversity question.
Right.
I've got a question that piggies off of Anita's question. The criteria on page 3 has us looking at growth patterns for 5 years. So some of what you talked about that we could kind of maybe extrapolate and guess if there's some open pockets for development. How would we get that idea of how much and where in 5 years in that specific area of time?
Well, I mean, we can, trying to remember if the city, I mean, we can certainly, we know like on the land we're acquiring from Linux, if it's this many acres, we know how many houses will generally go on that. You can say in 5 years, I don't know that much of that will be developed out as well. In fact, even on the northwest side, we could give you 20 years from now, maybe if everything filled in, what that would be. I'm not sure that it would be significant in 5 years from now, but we can certainly take that as a takeaway to see what we can look at there, certainly to get you comfortable with that.
Perfect.
I've got a question. We were talking a lot about busing and trying to keep, the students closer to their schools, and I was wondering if there's data that shows the way the main corridors for busing go to each one of these schools now, and how you'd anticipate that would change. So if we were looking at, I think it's version, the one where it's all the way down, version 3, yeah. So if you look at McGovern then, in version 3, you could potentially have the busing system would have to go all the way to the north part of Sioux Falls and all the way down to the south part. So we'd be interested to know what the traffic and the busing would be for something like that, if there would be some kind of.
Hopefully, the hope is, I mean, certainly the busing of McGovern should help it, having an additional high school on that side boundaries should hopefully improve it.
The other question is that even though east-west is going to be fairly straightforward for McGovern because it's so far north, when we look at some of the other versions, and we can go maybe to version 2, can we scroll that down a little bit? As we look at what will happen to Patrick Henry, we're having busing routes right through the middle of town on a north-south direction with lots of traffic during high traffic areas, and that's going to be a whole different ball of wax versus McGovern, which is a little farther out going east-west. So I think having some kind of idea of the main busing corridors would be helpful in making some of these decisions.
This is Sam with City of Sioux Falls Planning. We certainly can try to provide whatever you'd like in terms of future growth projections. I certainly work with the school district on that all the time. So just keep that in mind. We can certainly provide that information, whether it's over the next 5 years or if you want to see the next 20 years. So, and the same thing kind of goes with busing corridors. If you want to start seeing information about traffic projections or traffic counts, we've got that information too.
Thank you, Sam. Yeah, they have, Deanne, do you want them to just email them to Deanne at this point? And we'll work together to log those, make sure that we're following up on them. And like I said, we hope these are working sessions. And so next Wednesday night at 5:30, we'll dive back in and pick up where we left off, and at least spend the front end of the hour or the couple hours on kind of middle school. I hope I can get you some of the demographic information ahead of time or any other things. If we get some growth projections, we'll email those to you, and then dive into high school.
My own rule. If you have questions, take the district up on that. Ask questions, okay? Before I turn things over to the co-chairs to close things down, just want to thank you again for being here and spending your night here. Look forward to seeing you next week. And with that, I'll turn things over to our co-chairs. Please make sure you use your microphone.
Well, thank you all for keeping this very positive discussion. That's what I knew we could come away from here with good questions, and the solutions will come at the end. And I appreciate you giving your time to us to work through this process. The Let's Talk is just an excellent way to make sure that those questions that you have, comments that you have, ideas that you have, get to the school district, and then they will be delineated out to the appropriate person to get you answers. And I see in the written material that you should have an answer to your question or response to your comment within 48 hours. So best way to do that, if you have somebody that catches you at the grocery store, just remember what they've asked you, and come back, get online, and get the questions in so that a week from Wednesday, we can begin the session and work hard. So thank you all. Have a good evening.
Yes, I have all that to box up. Thank you.
I love the airport. I love doing that. No, I'm just saying, like I could go on my travel talk. Matter of fact, guys, I see besides that. That's right. No, that's good.
Just can't get into it. We can't get into it. don't want to touch it. That's why I want to be Brett to be crystal clear on. Thanks. Yeah. Yeah. You think it went good?